All right, what's going on, guys? We're gonna be recapping the trades from Friday. It was INTC is the primary trade in the morning. It was a next week expiration, so this upcoming week. Today's Sunday, and then some zero DT lottos. The zero DT lottos ran like 120%. The next week expiration ran like 60%. Very clean move, and I almost caught. I think I caught like a 2% move on the underlying. So yeah, by all means, pretty clean. And then we took the profit roll on high day on SPY the other day. Yes, Friday. It was literally high day, and then I covered that short into the FVG, kind of like in the mid range of where we were, because my daily bias was actually flipping a little bit long, right? So the what I'm going to explain in this video, guys, is how these major mega caps, how they make how the major mega caps with momentum that are propping up the indices, how they're higher time frame pivots, and where the order flow really matters, and where structure really matters, and where to look for the confluence of a very strong mover for the day that's propping up indices. Cool, right? And when we find that spot where it wants to cool at, that's where I could start positioning short on indices just for a profit roll. But it's very effective, very simple yet very effective. So this previous buy side was swept on NVIDIA, and that's literally all I was waiting for. I saw a big dark pool level down here and a gap up, and then there was just really no buy or following through with price on this low volume chop and digestion, filling this primarily most of this imbalance off this capitulation bar, rejecting the 500 psych, right? So I was looking for a pullback into these lows down here at least, and I was really looking for more like of a test of this spot right over here, right? Because this was a false breakdown, and then we consolidated. We held the 200 SMA. I'm not a big SMA guy, but we held it, and then we actually pivoted off of it with a shaved bottom, and then a sweep of that spot, and then a continuation higher right back into like above 500, right? So we got the short-term reversal kind of look down here, as well as a wick previously extending from that spot. Right, so I was already looking at potential relief within chips, and the same exact thing was kind of there with AMD. Right, we pretty much came back down into this like momentum bar, and then from a bar by bar perspective, guys, this was a very tight body with neutral wicks on it, and then we kind of had an inside. It's not technically an inside bar, but an inside bar kind of vibe, right? And then I pretty much held a higher low from there for Friday. And NVIDIA had the same exact look. I figured, if we're going to pivot off of 485, this site, which is previous highs, and we're going to pivot and hold that spot, then we should see relief into, in my opinion, probably the gap, right? And you could say it's hindsight, but this was part of the thesis for INTC, and I talked about this with the people that I trade with. So what happened was we found a nice bottom within indices on a daily level perspective. It was from here, right? So the 394 spot, a very big spot. You can't see it on the daily chart, but in pre-market, we held that spot, which is a retest of this basically November high, right? So it was the November high above the previous all-time high before we saw that extensive breakout, that blow of top into the December. And then, now we're starting to get that cool, right? So whenever I look at retests like this on a much higher time frame perspective, and I see how that we're holding these spots into the open, as well as many other tech names holding spots into the open, Microsoft being one of them off 367, right? Boom, 367, huge spot for Microsoft, as well as a 200 SMA. We had Amazon right at a big spot as well, 200 SMA, and it was actually holding, I believe, that spot into the open as well. Yeah, exactly that spot, right? So there was a lot of higher time frame spots where there's more liquidity, there's more action happening at these ranges, and you're going to see more of an extensive relief from these spots, right? So I figured, if NVIDIA is going to be that outlier mover for the day and prop up the indices, then what would I be looking at? I'd be looking at that to look for any sort of short position, considering the fact that there was no relatively strong or weak tech name out there, or not even, no, there wasn't really any sort of strong tech name out there as far as what I'm looking at for NVIDIA, right? And NVIDIA is a major holding within Qs now, so I was looking for this one to cool, and there was just a few spots that I was looking for. First of all, my target was pretty much 495. We blew right through 490, so I already just completely, scratched that, because 490 psych I think was my original target, which was primarily most of this imbalance, along with like the retest of the breakdown right over here. Blew completely through it. There was no signal of any sort of cool off happening from there until we got this gravestone doji off the gap and go from right over here, right? So if you go non-extended hours, you're going to see how this was the spot in which I was really, really, really looking at for a long or a short opportunity in the indices, right? Here's the gap. This is where it closed, and it primarily filled. Well, it filled in the entirety of the gap, and then printed a gravestone doji followed by a subsequent seller dominant candle, and then from there it was chop, chop, chop. I saw order flow shifting a little bit to favor the downside for at least just a pullback into a higher low. That's exactly what happened, and then we started getting these series of choppy bars with lower extending wicks from the bottom, showing buyers, signaling that they're there off of the 490 psych, right? So it all made sense. It was all from a structural standpoint where we're going to see relief in this name. I didn't think it would be this extensive, but we're going to see relief, right? And that was my whole entire thesis around INTC. INTC, I just think had it had more of like a, in my opinion, I like the premium on INTC for any sort of expiration, and I think what we really had to do was at least reach into this high, right? This high, I think, was that spot where we were going to at least see relief into. It wasn't necessarily any sort of expectations of a reversal trade or any crazy move. I was just looking to end off the week solid with, a base hit kind of day, and it actually turned into a crazy day. But probably a top 5, probably top 10, one of my best days ever since I started trading. But back into INTC, let's just talk about what I saw and why I took this one. So the $47 level was a level that I was glued to, right? It was the previous spot where we rejected, and it was that breakout. It was the breakout level, right? We closed above it ever so slightly. It was 47.07 to be exact. And then we got the gap up, and we started continuing higher. Sorry, I can't talk. And then we got that gap down, right? The gap down was into a very healthy structural retest. There wasn't any sort of alarming volume on this push down, and it was really just into this previous breakout level that we held. And we based it, and then saw that continuation higher. So I figured, this spot down here, it's going to be a good one. And I never caught that spot yesterday, but I figured this is going to see probably one more day of relief, at least for a test into this spot, right? So if NVIDIA is strong, if AMD seeing that relief, then I could certainly trade INTC to the upside as well. I saw the early morning rejection off of this spot. And then I seen this tweezer bottom down here. If you go into the 1 minute, you're going to be able to see how, we push down, and then you just get this random heavy pop, right? And on this heavy pop in order flow, what I was seeing was, psych levels are normally respected in the tape, right? And when you see no major supply willingly to press price beneath a level that makes sense, right? Or they pull, or they're absorbed, or they're not refreshing as much as what the other side would, then you're eventually going to see that push through, and then eventually and hopefully what you would be looking for would be, if you're long, a bidder's pinch above that $47 level. That's exactly what I saw in the order flow. It was almost perfect. It almost resulted in almost like a unfinished auction beneath 47, or a finished auction, I should say. And then from there, it kind of pivoted above 47. I don't really utilize the 1 minute, guys, but the fact that there was no willing seller to step in at above 47 and pin this thing beneath 47 was really all I needed to know. We had our pre-market high spot that I was also looking at, along with the 15-minute orb high, right? Both held to a T, and I saw a lot of buyers really starting to come into the market and defend that 15-minute orb high, as well as the pre-market high. I'm not a big pre-market wick kind of guy. I don't think the wick exactly matters so much, especially when it's a random candle like this. Who knows if it's even sometimes it's completely incorrect data from another brokerage, or another charting software, but the fact that this held this cleanly And I saw chip sentiment, and it was quite bullish. I was looking at least a small relief into 490, like I said. This was almost perfect alignment, right? I took INTC right over here on this push up above in this retest into like 47.15-ish. I think I even took it a little bit down here because I started to notice, asks preparing to kind of pull off of this spot, and there wasn't really any sort of alarming supply that would in my opinion, really force the pin the underlying underneath 47, and I started seeing heavy stacks of bids move up, right? And any sort of ask that came into play was just matched by a bigger bidder that would completely soak all those orders. It was almost like immediate absorption with little to no supply, like I said. So I started sizing into these contracts above 47 with this close on this bar, and then I immediately went up and caught a lot of leeway off of this spot. So it was pretty much a stress-free trade into my target, which was the Wednesday high, right? So the Wednesday high, I mean, you could always take yourself a little range, but, at the end of the day, your target doesn't have to be the exact wick. I don't know if that's necessarily safe, but I never really seen any sort of crazy red flag. And I noticed, NVIDIA, AMD, those were staying relatively strong throughout the morning. That's all I really needed to know to hold on to my INTC trade. Like I said, just a simple relief trade. I wasn't looking at any sort of crazy expansive move. It was more or less just, level to level, right? I just, I don't know. I have a better feel for the INTC tape than I would like more of like a expensive underlying. I don't know why. I like the cheap stocks that have more quantities of shares traded, on average per minute. That's just, where I find that's my bread and butter for reading order flow. Let's go over to the QQQ short that I took, or SPY short. Well, I used QQQ. I don't even know why I took SPY, to be honest. But let's talk about QQQ. Let's go into like regular trading hours no. Okay, so first of all, we were pivoting off of a major higher time frame spot, like I said at the beginning of the video. This spot down here, 394, right? Obviously, with higher time frame spots like this that are looking like stronger momentum into the open, and then you see a candle like this with little to no volume on the retracement, and then hammer bars after that carry out higher lows, and then this major breakthrough bar. I mean, guys, that's not something that I'm looking to short, right? It's short term. It's momentary. It's momentum for just the moment that we're in, right? It's not something like any sort of daily higher time frame reversal, nothing like that. It's just the fact that we're retesting and pivoting in big tech along with indices at crucial spots that weren't ever even really retested yet. So I had no interest in shorting anything. And then from there, we obviously saw this breakout bar, heavy volume, still no interest in shorting. And then we started getting these heavy volume, low spread bars. And from a bar by bar perspective, guys, I mean, this is going to likely just pull down slightly, ever so slightly, into this fair value gap, into this imbalance, maybe from PM session resistance on Thursday. And then it's probably going to continue higher and at least see higher highs. And when it's going to distribute, it's going to be higher highs that are distributing. It's not going to be on full on out reversal. It could be, but that's very unlikely, especially after seeing this bar right here and this breakout candle. So I was just simply going to look at my higher highs and seeing if they were selling the higher highs. And there was obviously a seller that came in at 10 o'clock, right? That seller came in at 10. Obviously, we had the hourly clock change volatility coming in at 10, and then 10 minutes later after that major breakout looking bar, very strong bar, we started to see, a seller step in, right? Higher high, seller, right? And then just a slow grind higher and almost like a mini wedge. I'm not a big like pattern trader, but like what a wedge really resembles is there going to be a bidder at a higher high who's willing to pin price and let it go higher whenever we're reaching into resistance and we're reaching into slow momentum where the higher highs are almost making no progression from a micro standpoint, right? If we look at this from this first projection where the seller steps into up here in this supply range, it was a 60-cent progression in an hour. There's not a lot of momentum behind that. And whenever this lines up with that outlier mover for a cool-off potential, then it's it's perfect, right? The strongest name on the day and the name that was going absolutely parabolic, right? It was Nvidia, right? And Nvidia's a sentiment driver, guys. If the other names are flat and Nvidia's, it's going and it's going and it's going, I'm waiting for that signal for Nvidia to cool, right? And that's off this textbook gap fill entry setup, right? We fill the entirety of the gap when you go into an hourly or daily perspective of things, guys. This is your general range of resistance that we're really climbing into, and names just can't keep going and keep going and keep going. And I noticed order flow start flipping here with a heavy volume gravestone doji followed by a subsequent inside bar with a seller dominant wick on it, and then chop, chop, chop. We start getting that breakdown bar, and then there was really no willing bidder to carry out that shallow of a higher low. So it's probably going to obviously correct itself into more of a higher low, into the 390 psych, or this little spot of consolidation, or we're going to maybe continue off of. You're hardly ever going to see a spot where you get this shallow of a higher low, and then you don't see heavier bids willing to step up into the spot, right? And it's almost like they push up, they know they're not strong enough, and then you'll see a pull, or you'll see asks start pressing and moving down, and you get that shift in your structure where there's immediate absorption up here, right? And then there's consolidation, almost like the order book gets wiped out, or it's still going through a very small phase of micro distribution, and then you get this pop down. And then once you see these lower volume, higher low attempts, right? And you don't see, heavier bids coming in off these spots, and you see asks potentially pressing this, or really just no demand at all within the tape, then you're going to see a short-term cool. And that's exactly what my thesis was really stemming from, was at 11 o'clock, 11:10, whatever it may, like that general range. And if you go over to QQQ, 11:10, or SPY, I was short at like 11:10 for an entry, and 11:15 was that capitulation bar. I was already green, but it was a profit roll, so I decided to hold this thing pretty much into this imbalance down here, right? It was from here into like here. That was the general spot I was looking at. I think it would also might have been like a 618 entry. Yeah, exactly, the 618. So I pretty much scaled primarily all of it right over here, and then I left a ton on the table, I'm not gonna lie, but it is what it is. I was cool with the 100% return. I think we pulled like four 100% gainers on Friday, so I was cool with that being my second or third one for the day. And I was really just stacking profit, only risking like a quarter to 1/5 of what I was up on the day. So there wasn't really any sort of heavy risk associated with the trade. It was more or less utilizing the cheaper, further out of the money premiums to really, really, really maximize profit if I'm confident in a cool off in the indices. And I did not expect this whole thing to reverse, not at all. But it is what it is, and you're oftentimes going to miss out on gains whenever you find tops like this. It's really risky to hold, especially on a 0DTE, guys, until you're in the money and further in the money, where your premium is going to move a little bit slower. You can go from 100% down to only green 20% within one or two candles, right? So I figured it was probably just best to cut this thing right here in this imbalance on Qs, and that's exactly where I did. Very simple. And yeah, I mean, it was just a very simple yet clean trade where the sentiment was really there. I noticed the confluence between more names than just Nvidia, but I was focusing Nvidia order flow at that spot where the gravestone doji happened, and I didn't notice any sort of like aggression for buyers up there. They definitely were laying off a little bit, playing a little bit more passive, right? I don't think price right now is at a spot where there's going to be heavy bidders falling price and falling price extensively and aggressively into gap fill areas or resistances. I don't think that's really a thing right now, especially whenever our daily bias is coming from seeing this gappy price action, but seller dominant price action. Seeing us beneath higher low structure from over here, right? That all started on Wednesday. A bidder obviously tried to step into the market over here on Wednesday, and then from there he actually failed, and then there was more selling to come. We got the gap down, and yeah, now we were retesting those higher time frame spots. I was looking at NVIDIA relief. We saw the NVIDIA relief, the relief into the gap, Gravestone Doji off the gap. Order flow shifts a bit off the gap. That's all I really need for an entry, especially seeing the fact that there's a mini wedge on QQQ. And the only thing about the setup that I didn't like, guys, was it was a little bit lower of a probability, considering that there was an external high that wasn't really swept, right? No, there was no sweep on SPY or Qs, so it was a little bit sketchy, but it was still a pretty solid entry. And my stop loss wasn't so tight because, like I said, the whole entire position was only 1/4 to like 1/5 of my daily profit. My day already was it was my biggest day for 2024 on Friday. So and it was my biggest ever since the start for the first 30 minutes to 1 hour off INTC. So yeah, I mean it was pretty easy. But yeah, so those were the trades for that day, and then we'll talk. Actually, I'll talk about one more trade. So, indices price action, that's what I'm best at, and that was very clean Friday, considering we were pivoting off of a higher liquid zone in a very minimized range. I have my new weekly prep kind of marked out. I don't normally draw zones, guys. Levels give me a better risk to reward and in precision with my 0DT entries off of like just a simple level. But I'm using a zone now just for this week, but I didn't have this before. What I had was if we go into the daily chart, or you go into the 4 hour with extended on, you'll be able to see it, right? We were pivoting off of, like I said, just simple retests, right? And these retests were coming from November highs. So whenever you see these retests and you see these heavier swings in pre-market, there's a sense there should be a slight signal in your head telling you, hey, there's more interaction down here. There's more liquidity down here. There might be price action might get a little bit more swingy down here, right? Not a ton of consolidation or chop, right? We might start, finding. That's what I like to say when I say bing bong. Where you might start looking for like, swingy price action like this, if that makes sense, right? So whenever I saw this cool, right, I took it down into here. Beautiful trade, 100 and something % on a profit roll. I'll take that all day. And then we actually capitulated even further on this noon clock change. It was weird. It was at noon too. I don't know if there was like an auction or anything, but I didn't even care because I was already out. So I was looking for relief, right? I was looking for relief into this spot. We actually caught the relief. This is funny. We caught the. I know it sounds degenerate, and this isn't realistic for everybody. I don't want to make you think that you have to trade a 0DTE at all. It's honestly very degenerate. If you don't size it properly, it's going to be a drain on your mental capital and your physical capital. So obviously fibs from pre-market low to the current swing high. I'm looking at discount or lower. That's literally always my rule. And once I see discount or lower, that's where I'm starting to look, potentially positioning long. I took the opening print long right over here, at least for just simple relief. I thought this imbalance would fill off the opening print, considering we had these wicks right off the opening print, right? So I took calls down here. I went up like 40%. I'm on my TradingView app, or else I would show the Discord. It was all done live. And then we actually found the lower high, and then we continued lower. And all it was really doing, guys, was it was simply digging more into a pre-market high retest, probably also like on SPY, and also simply just a GP retest. I think it was digging more into the GP down here on SPY, and that's exactly what it did with a tweezer bottom, right? Just a simple tweezer bottom right over here. And then relief. I did catch a portion of this relief. I kept swinging. I just kept profit rolling some 0DT entries with a 50% stop, but only risking like 1/5, 1/6 of my day's profits. As soon as I gave back a little bit, I'm done. We really didn't lose any of them, but we just kept moving up, right? Moving up, moving up. I'm looking for primarily most of this imbalance and capitulation to fill, and that's where I'm going to start reevaluating my short for an entry, right? My general spot was going to be imbalance all the way over here to this break a structure spot, right? So we broke structure right over here. This higher low failed, as well as just this simple imbalance, right? So from a bar by bar perspective, the imbalance is pretty much created from the body of this bar into the breakdown of this range, right? So you could give yourself a very minimized range to start positioning short. That's exactly what I saw. I profit rolled this thingy again. And yeah, it was a beautiful trade. Seeing all of these series of highs held equally. And then we saw an extension and a wick above, and that wick above failed miserably. It failed miserably with heavier volume stepping in on that wick above, and then it pretty much, broke down out of that spot, retested and held, and then there's your cool off, right? And like I said, since, we're in technically a short-term downtrend, very, very short-term downtrend on the indices, I was expecting simple relief back into like maybe here, and then once I noticed and I reacted to order flow here, and I seen the fact that asks were not necessarily aggressive, but bids, buyers just weren't willing to do anything here, right? They weren't willing to do anything here, and I noticed a couple bigger bidders in the tech sector, as well as the indices. He moved back. So I'm reading kind of the emotion from a bigger player that makes an impact on the market. I don't. I'm trading a couple $1,000 positions on derivatives. That doesn't mean anything. I can't remember if there was any gamma levels in this range, but we don't even need to talk about that because price and volume is what matters. So yeah, I mean, we got the breakdown bar, heavy volume on the breakdown bar, and just no effort after in the volume right here, right? So I considered to let this run back into primarily most of this move up, at least 50% of it. It was, again, a profit roll, so completely emotionless. So I took this one down into here or something. I got 120%, and it fucking broke down and ran at another 200%. Who cares? Whatever. But yeah, those were the trade recaps for Friday, guys. Just simple price action, reading price, reading volume, reading tape. Very basic yet very effective if you're patient, right? And that's a lot of your guys' problem. You're not patient with your ranges that you want to trade in. You're not sizing properly, and that's gonna kill you. But yeah, so I'll probably try and do more of these if you guys like them. If you guys find them helpful, I'll be glad to do more. I already do them for my members a little bit, but yeah, expect more of these. Probably within probably after Vixpiration. Probably expect more. Later.